Hey, on this episode of Home Water Dispatch, I am on the Caicos Bank, southern part of the Bahamian Archipelago. Over the last week, been running a series of workshops, or helping to facilitate a series of workshops with the Department of Fisheries and Marine Resource Management, thinking about the role bonefish play in sustainable livelihoods and the blue economy, and really thinking about how recreational fishing plays into that and how sustainable harvest plays into that. And it's a complex world. It's a complex, dynamic set of stakeholders and rights holders. And it's interesting to be back here in the Turks and Caicos Islands. It's been a number of years, and it's neat to be back on the flats doing kind of what I like is fishing for bonefish. And so I'm using this episode, though, to think more about the intersection of fly fishing and sustainable livelihoods, and keeping fly fishing and recreational angling sustainable. And how do we reduce the impacts of fishing on, in this particular case, bonefish? And you might think that it's kind of a little odd that I've been also talk about temperature in the same episode, but temperature is a big part of it. Back where I live now in Massachusetts, there are, the water temperature is really high. I'm not targeting trout anymore because the water temperature is too high. Those cold water species are very sensitive to an increase in water temperature. And you might think that's not the case for bonefish, but it actually is the case for bonefish too. And so yesterday, I've got my thermometer with me. We're out on the flats. The water was 92. And so that's potentially, we've done some science, and that's kind of almost close to their thermal limit. We have to start being conscientious about how we're handling fish and bonefish at those temperatures. Today it's 85, 82, somewhere in there. Oh, I can measure it again. I'll do that while I'm chatting. I'll turn my thermometer on and measure it. And so, it's a little overcast, and so it's a little gentler on the fish. You might think, what's the big deal about water temperature? And so water temperature go hand in hand with the metabolism of fish. Fish are ectotherms, meaning that their body temperature is directly related to the environment. Yes, there are some species fish species that can regulate their body temperature a little bit. Tuna can do that. Some species of sharks can do that. Bonefish can't. Trout can't. And so when water temperature increases, their metabolism increases. And so when metabolism increases, what do we do? What happens when our metabolism increases? Oh, you have to huff and puff more because you need to respire. You need to bring in oxygen to fuel that additional respiration or that metabolism. And then you have to get rid of carbon dioxide and other metabolic byproducts that go with, that higher metabolism. Fish need to do that too. And as water temperature goes up, so does their metabolism. So higher water temperatures, when we're fishing for them and then exercising them, that's that extra boost in metabolism. That's the fight or flight response. So they're fighting against the line, their metabolism's going up. And so when fish are experiencing that and they're at or close to or even near their thermal tolerance limits, it can be more impactful. We need to keep that in mind as anglers. We talk about that a lot for cold water fish species like trout. Again, going back up to Massachusetts or Montana or Idaho or Colorado, water temperatures, California, water temperatures are increasing. Cold water fish species have been adapting for generations over time. They're evolved to deal with cold water. And so when things go from 60 to 61 to, a little bit higher, their metabolism is going up. And then when we exercise them on the end of the line, they're metabolically challenged. We have to worry about that. Same with bonefish here on the flats. It's July right now. Again, when the sun was out yesterday, and there was no wind, man, these flats got hot. And we need to be conscientious, even on the flats. I'm going to take my water temperature right now. Even on the flats, when you're going out for bonefish in the peak summer, July, August, it's 86 right now. we need to be conscientious about water temperature. Take a thermometer. It's a great tool to take all the time, whether you're fishing for trout or bonefish or tarpon or whatever. And so here's the kicker. When water temperature goes up, the amount of dissolved oxygen goes down. Think about putting a pot of water on the stove, turning up the heat, it starts to bubble, right? The dissolved content, the gases volatilize, right? And fish don't breathe air, the air in the atmosphere. They breathe dissolved oxygen in the water. As water temperatures go up, there's less dissolved oxygen in the water, right? So as we're exercising them on the end of a line as an angler, their metabolism is already going up. If you're targeting them when the water temperatures were warmer, right, they're already trying to compensate for that warmer water and the lower dissolved oxygen. They're already breathing more to try to meet those metabolic demands. So in these warm weather conditions, hot conditions, cold water fish species struggling for, because their metabolism is going up, the dissolved oxygen in water is decreasing, right? And then, so we have to be more conscientious when we're fishing for them. Best practices for catch and release at those higher water temperatures, man, they mean even more. And that's also why, for cold water fish species especially, that we have Hoot Owl restrictions, right? We don't go out during peak of the day when water temperatures are really high. You go out in the morning or late afternoon, likely mostly in the morning, when the evening has a chance to cool the water down, the metabolism of the fish is less, and then that way when we're fishing for them, we're exercising them, we still are not reaching the point where we're overtaxing their metabolism and ultimately potentially leading to mortality. And whether you see it on the end of your line or when you bring the fish to hand or after it's let go, sometimes we don't see that mortality. But this is that intersection that all anglers need to know, that there's this connection between water temperature, metabolism, and dissolved oxygen that's actually here in the water. And yes, it is particularly important to these wonderful cold water species that we like to target, brook trout, cutthroats. It's the water temperature as you start to creep up. It's not 68. It's actually closer to like lower 60s that anglers need to be much more aware. Out here on the flats, higher 80s when you're fishing for bonefish. Start getting over 90, man, you might want to think about when you're targeting bonefish, going to a place maybe where the tidal conditions have brought in cooler water from the bank or from the ocean. So you have to be much more conscientious. And this is basic fish biology 101 applied to when we go fishing. And I can't, yes, I'm going to do more about this when I get home on my local trout streams, but I wanted to use the opportunity here to think about what it means for bonefish on the flats and what it means for tropical flat species, and also going back full circle to sustainable livelihoods and how fly fishing based ecotourism happens in places like this in the Turks and Caicos Islands or the Bahamas or the Seychelles, right? And so this is where, and a lot of anglers that come here during the other parts of the time of the year, they're fishing for trout, and they might not necessarily think that temperature and dissolved oxygen and all that stuff is all that it doesn't matter for bonefish, but it does. And so this goes back full circle to the workshops that we're running. We ran one in Providenciales, and we're running one in South Caicos to work with the fishing guides, to work with the fisheries officers, to work with other stakeholders and rights holders to understand the fundamental biology of fish, how fish are tied to their environment, and what that means when we go fishing for them. Or when we're harvesting fish and you leave one on the end of a dock and it's potentially needs to go back because of a size regulation. Man, all that stuff matters. So stay tuned for more. I'm gonna do more episodes of Home Water Dispatch this summer, tied into water temperature and then throwing in angling and throwing in some other aspects of basic biology that we need to know and understand and appreciate and adapt to when it comes to fishing for them, and when it also comes to marketing fishing tourism, when it comes to thinking about how it all fits within the blue economy. So it's all connected, but the core part of this, it's the common ground. The common ground, and when we're out here thinking about fish and promoting recreational fisheries, the common ground is the fish, right? It's their biology, ecology, their habitat, the places where they live, and their basic metabolism and reproduction and growth. Those fundamentals are so important. So stay tuned for more. Thanks for sticking with me for 10 minutes on these flats. We're gonna go chase some more bonefish. And yeah, we'll see you later. Peace.